Hello everyone, this is Full Shock and I'm going to be doing a replay review for Shikaka right here, who is the pink player who is teching. So I'm going to kind of do a breakdown of three things. One, I'm going to talk about failed negotiations as a map. Then we're going to go through kind of his play and optimizing it. And then I'll give sort of just a brief summation of general points for improvement. So first, when we look at failed negotiations, right, and especially when you're teching, you always want to look at energy sources and just resources in general. So we can look, title is 20. Generally speaking, title above 20 is absolutely incredible, especially for core because they have slightly cheaper titles. Average wind is 12 and min wind is 2. An average wind of 12 is incredible for both ARM and core. And last, there are geos on this map. So there's a geo here, there's a geo here. And when I look at those, I say, okay, if there's good wind, because it'll be hard for me to get a boat, I should probably try to build some wind and then try to take my geo. Generally, you can try to take a geo around 200 energy, especially if you have an E storage. The last thing when you're looking at a map is you want to see how much reclaim there is, or if there's reclaim. So the easy way to do that is just to literally select the whole thing. Here we can see there is 5450 metal and 362,000 energy, which means if you're thinking about it just before you start playing, you're kind of committed to going bots because you really want res bots and you want to try to get as much of the metal and as much of the energy as possible. Generally speaking, metal reclaim is in contested areas. Here on this map, there's 1.2k in mid, right? If we grab your commander, there's 1250 in mid. So if you just think about it from a teching perspective, that's an entire commander, right? A commander rec is literally 1,250. So if you were to take all of that, it's the same as detonating your comm, which is amazing. The rest of the metal on this map is kind of thrown generally on the beaches. So like here, 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 there's some right there, there's some right there. So when we're looking at what we want to build and how we want to do, it makes a lot of sense to try to have res bots to take these early ones, and then also have res bots to get energy from the trees. Because even here, right, there's what, 30,000 energy right next to you, and you could just take all that and it'll fund your T1 economy. So that's kind of the resource side of failed negotiations. And then the next part is where you want to play on the map and sort of what's going to happen. The two island spawns here and here are the strong side of the sea. They get way more mexes. So this player and this player, when they're coming down and coming up, they have less metal to work with. And that's really important because on split maps where there's sea and land and the sea interacts with the land, generally speaking, whoever wins the sea can win the game. So you want to be really cognizant of if red is pushing, you want to be able to funnel resources into him. And if purple is losing, you want to also maybe try to help him survive long enough, right? These are unequal lanes. So strong side, and then weak side, weak side. There's also a strong weak side kind of dynamic here where there isn't a mexin difference, but this player will play against this player and they get a geo. So sometimes because it's a more defensible position and they have a geo, this player can have a little bit of an advantage, but it's nowhere near as pronounced. I think this is like 8 or 9 mexes versus like 14, which is really substantial. So that is failed negotiations in a nutshell. The only other thing to kind of mention that could be important is that these ridges, if you're building supporting units, vehicles can't go up them, only hovercraft or bots can. So as a techer, if you're trying to support something up here, you would need to send bots generally. Like if you send Mausers up here, they can't go down. So they'll get the bonus range and shoot stuff down here, but they can't actually drive down it. Now let's jump into your actual build itself. So we've got 3 mexes queued. Because it's a wind map, I would actually recommend you probably go mex, wind, mex. Alternatively, you can just go triple mex into double solar. Triple mex into double solar isn't bad at all. It just means that you'll have a little bit less energy at the beginning. You'll spend a bit more metal, but you're safe in case the wind drops. So I think either is fine here. when we look and the wind is 8 point, yeah, so actually I think your solar choice here actually is gonna pay off because wind is dropping, and so you can build the solars and you'll be okay. So we've got both of these going up. So first solar is done, second solar is coming up. When you bot lab before you build your first, you generally want over 60 energy, so you'll end up at 65 once this is done, and you can drop your bot lab. So we're right on schedule here. All right, bot lab goes down, which is great. And then let's see what you queue up. A small aside from reviewing this that I don't think you'll be able to integrate into your gameplay right away, but something that I would recommend is when you're next to an air players generally have to start air lab, and air cons are really bad. And you, as a tech player, almost always want 1 to 2 transports to do things like move T2 really far, right? Or like to fly your commander. There's a bunch of mexes here, and sometimes it's efficient if you have a transport, an air transport, you can just fly your commander to all these mexes and take them and build them really quick before you have to detonate him. That isn't something you need to integrate into your gameplay right away, but it's just something to think about, where if you're in a game and you're next to an air player, you can say, hey, can I trade a ground con for 2 transports? And you can kind of play around with them. All right, back to the build. Here we go. We've got 1 grave robber and we've got 2 bot cons. So I like the grave robber. I would probably go double grave robber. And the reason why is, we're going back for solars. So I would actually start probably double grave robber. The reason why is you're going to e-stall pretty hard. And I would say you could have 1 grave robber immediately head to mid or start eating the trees. You could do either depending on your energy situation. I think when this guy finishes, you'll probably be out of E. So I would actually have your first grave robber come here and start eating trees just to booster your energy economy. And then I'd have the next grave robber come here and help contest the island. The reason why I would say it's better to do your second grave robber there is for 2 reasons. One is you're going to e-stall, right? I would assume, we'll see, but I'm assuming you're going to e-stall. And second is, as you play versus kind of better and more aggressive players, they'll send grunts here like right away. And so even if your resbot gets to middle, if there aren't units with it, it's just going to die. And a lot of times commanders, like good players, will get a transport and they'll just fly their commander to mid, right? Their air player will give them a transport and fly him to mid. So I would go double resbot here because you want to eat both rocks and trees. And then I would probably queue up like 3-4 cons. And we can talk about that in a second. So here, you're going back for solar. And on a map like this, solar is just not as efficient. So I would actually be building wind right here. The only time you want to build solar later on like this is if you're e-stalling. And the reason you do that is because solar costs no energy, but windmills do cost energy. So if you're completely at 0 and you're e-stalling, you can build solars to kind of build a base back up. The problem is you aren't e-stalling, you have a bunch. So I would recommend that you drop wind here instead, because it's just going to be way more efficient. I do like this little play though, where you are boosting out the grave robber and then building the solar and then boosting and then building. Ooh, or maybe not. Let's see. So grave robber comes out and he's going to eat trees, which is, oh, he's going to go to mid. Okay. I mean, this works here, but so this is what I was talking about before. See how you're e-stalling here, right? There's like 33,000 E right next to you. If this guy starts going, that's awesome. And no one else has units in mid yet. With that being said, a lot of times you can sneak a resbot in and start kind of eating this stuff. But just to be more efficient, I would say double resbot specifically for this map because of the reclaim. And this guy could be eating energy sooner. Yeah, here we go. Swapping back and forth. This is the tech micro I like to see right here. All right, and this guy is building a mechs. Another small aside, I would say, it's probably more useful for frontline than it is for backline, but always get in the habit of having like huge build queues. So for example, this guy, right, you could say, okay, build that and then build this and then build this and then build this and then build this and then, you know, build that and then build this, right? But like have a super long queue so that if you get distracted because there's bombers coming in, or if someone types to you and says, hey, where's my T2 con or whatever, and you get distracted, this guy's still going to be building a bunch of stuff, right? And you don't have to micro him. Something that can happen, especially when like a con ends up going off screen, is you're looking at your base and you're doing stuff, and then you zoom out and there's just a con and he's just been taking a nap. He's like kicking back, talking with his friends. He called his mom, he ordered some drinks, right? So you really want to get long queues wherever you can. And just to kind of give you a numerical comparison for why wind is better on this map. So here, wind is, we'll say 12 just for ease, right? You've got 4 solars. And if we look at the bottom, 4 solars cost 600 metal and they give you 80 energy. Core wind, which is more expensive, is 45 metal. But if you take that, right, 600 metal into wind would be like 13 windmills, a little more than 13 windmills. But all of those would be producing, we'll say 12, right? Which would end up at like 160. So if all this metal was in wind right here, you'd have double the amount of energy income. So I think the initial 2 solars are good, but keep in mind, like when you jump in these maps, you can say, oh, average wind is 12, or, you know, like the wind seems good, the title seems good. You always want to alter your build to the map. And in this map, wind is better. So I would say try to avoid like overbuilding, especially something like solar that's less efficient. And what's our con doing? So we need to boost this guy out. What are we? Okay. And that's another thing where you could build this and then hold shift and then just have him boost your lab. All right, so we've got 2 cons out. We've got 1 con taking these, and we've got nothing. What's going on? Okay, so we're gonna build a con turret. So 2 things. This is the right idea because when you tech, you need build power. And generally, whenever you tech, you build either 1 or 2 con turrets. Here, you generally would build 2 because there's so many mexes and it's so resource rich that you can utilize the build power. But I think you're building it too early. I think it should be like a minute later for a couple of reasons. One is, you need more cons just to be building stuff, right? This con is going to be tapping mexes. You're probably ideally going to have another con in a perfect situation building wind because it'd be more efficient. And then you want another con to come over here and build the geo because the geo is the most efficient energy source on this entire map. The other reason why you want cons instead of turrets is that a con turret is 3,200 energy and you're probably going to e-stall momentarily. And yes, it's more build power, it's 200 build power, but bot cons, which are roughly half the cost, right? They have 80 build power, which is slightly less, right? If you were to have 2 of them be 160, but they give you 7 energy a second, which means that if you build these, instead of being at that rate, you'd have an extra 14 energy, which early game actually is impactful. So here, we're going to watch you e-stall. And when you e-stall in this situation, it's rough because then like the mexes and other things that you're building, right? They aren't going to work. And then we start building grunts. Let's talk about that in a second. But the reason why you don't want to build construction turrets too early is just for this reason, because you're going to e-stall and you won't be able to even utilize everything you have. So this guy's going and we start to build grunts. Oh yeah, and how did the mid... Oh yeah, okay, so this is the dream right here. I don't know why no one from this side came up, but you're able to consume. You want to eat as much of this as possible. So I love this play, it worked out. I still think the double one would be good. And you start building grunts. I don't think you need grunts here at all. Generally, as a techer, you don't want to build any offensive units for the first well, it depends, but I would say on average, like the first 8 to 10 minutes, unless someone's slinging you resources to build Mausers. So what that means is instead of spending your build power and your time building grunts, you should be building more of an economy and getting your geo up. The reason why is that you have all these people in front of you and when you think about your job as tech is to get T2 as soon as possible, and then to give T2 to your teammates, and then to have like a timing push where maybe you're going to go Shiva, maybe you're going to go Karg, right? But you're going to have some sort of units that can win the game. Building fighting units early is just going to slow down your whole thing. And that's just a general comment. The one time you do want to build them is if you look and everyone in mid is dead and you see like ticks or something coming, then you can just drop a bunch of grunts and just build them right away. But building them now is kind of pointless because they're not even contesting mid. And if you look, you've only seen purple here, but orange is already here and tan is coming, and whatever color this is, dark red is coming, right? So you have all these people coming. You don't need these units. In general, when you're teching, just try to limit your unit production so that you don't need it. And again, this is a longer queue thing, right? He could have built the turret and then started building wind right here because you need more E, right? And you're closing in on 200 to take the Geo. And we're reclaiming our lab. So great idea with reclaiming the lab. I still would have built more cons, and we're going to go asolar. Okay, so good idea with reclaiming the lab. I like that. I think here what makes more sense is to try to build the Geo as soon as possible. Oh God, there's so many unclaimed mexes. So this is another reason why you always want cons, like a bunch of cons generally when you're teching. If you don't need them later, you can just eat them for the metal, whatever, it's quick, but they'll give you energy. But in a situation like this, like, look at all these unclaimed mexes. If you had like one or two more cons, right? He could come down here and maybe like get these. You could have another one come up here and take, you know, these, and you could have another one take the Geo, take that, and then just rally them back. But there's so much metal being left out on the field here. And even if, like, for example, these two are normally taken by the air player, but he hasn't taken them yet. If you just round this up to 2 metal a second, just think about it numerically, right? A metal extractor is 50 metal. So this will pay for itself in like 25 to 30 seconds. So even if you just build it and hold it for half a minute and then your ally pings and is like, hey, that's mine, you can give it to him later and you still come out ahead. So that's another reason why multiple cons would be better, especially for this map. We're going asolar. You've got a lot of metal, which is cool, but asolars, just to give you an idea, right, are 370 metal and they produce 75 energy. A T1 Geo is 540 metal and it's 300 energy, right? Right? So four asolars produce the same amount of energy as a T1 Geo, except that four of them are like 1300 metal and this guy's 500, right? 540. So it ends up being, you know, like the same amount of energy, except it's like 2.5 times the cost essentially. So for that reason, you want to take the Geo. The one thing that you kind of need to do before you take the Geo generally is put down energy storage, because a Geo's 13K. And so you kind of need a bigger back to be able to fill it. In this situation, if you had wind, you would have been at the 200 and you could have just built the Geo. So here you built these grunts, but they're not doing anything. We kind of talked about it. If you do build them and you find out, oh, I don't need these anymore, you can reclaim them for more metal, or you can just gift them, right? You can just say, hey, Orange, here's some grunts. Maybe you can do something with them. Okay. So your Resbot comes back, but he's not doing anything. And that's just a slight APM stall that happens to us all. But yeah, just do hit E, drag a circle, area command to, sorry, not repair, to reclaim all the trees. And we're starting to build a ton of buildings. these are all energy generating buildings. I think instead, if your commander just went over here and built this geo, it would make way more sense to do. Basic solars are even less energy efficient, so it's going to be a little rough to do this. Okay, so we're still building here. Something that I'm noticing here is that you're kind of overcommitting into T1 economy. When you tech, your whole goal is to get to tier 2 as quickly as possible with a stable enough economy to produce tier 2 units and then jumpstart a tier 2 economy. Generally what that means is you want around like 500 energy. You can do it on 400, but like 400 to 500 energy, less with storage, and then a bunch of metal. But if we look here, right, you're at 234 right now. When this geo finishes, you'll be at 530. That's all the energy you need. So you don't need these other solars. You could literally just drop your tier 2 lab right now. And it'd come up really quick, right? It'd come up at like 5.5 minutes once you run up and detonate your commander. Yeah, untapped maxes. Okay. So before you detonate your commander, you really want to use his build power to finish that geo. Geos require a lot of build power, and the commander has like the most build power out of anything in the game, right? A normal botcon has 80 build power. A nano has 200. Your commander has 300. So before you detonate him, you want to use as much of his build power as possible. And that's why if you ran over here and boosted that, it'd be better. And then keep in mind, you don't need this. You just need to be at that, like, 400 to 600, say 500 energy to go T2. And you can do it on less on a lot of other units, or on a lot of other maps. Ooh, the OP layout's in. Hold on, wait, what is your... Okay, so you make a relatively good choice here where you say, oh, I'm overflowing a bunch of energy. I should make converters, which is the right play. There's kind of two parts to this though. One, I think you probably need more build power than converters right now. So I'd probably drop more converters, or you need build power more than converters. So I drop one more nano, and then converters. If you hold space and X on grid, I'm not sure what it is on default, but on space and X, it'll show two circles, right? The inner circle is if it dies, that's its death explosion damage. And the outer is if you self-D, that's its self-D. So if you have converters right next to nanos and anything comes in and kills a converter, they'll explode and they'll pop each other and they'll pop your nanos. So instead of building these nestled together, just move them up like here and then just build a square of converters so that if they die, they don't kill all your build power with them. But you make the right call here where you say, hey, I'm accessing a bunch of energy and I should build converters. This guy needs to get done. So you generally want to try to have your T2 lab finished by like 6 minutes on most maps. Because this is a resource rich map, you probably could have gotten it out a bit sooner. So he's just now going to go take those mexes, right? And it's 5 minutes and there's still some unclaimed ones here. Okay, so you do get another nano. Awesome. How big is the explosion for my count? Oh yeah, so sorry. This, if you click him, the outer circle is his death, but when you self-D, it's the flashing yellow. So you just need to make sure that's out of range of your stuff. But you don't need or want to detonate your commander yet for a couple of reasons. So first, your commander gives you resources, right? Your commander gives you 25 energy a second and 2 metal a second. You only have 12 metal a second right now. I mean, you ideally should have more, because if you had these other mexes, it'd be, you have what, like 5 mexes right now? Yeah, you've got what, 5 mexes, and you could have 1, 2, 3, 4. You could have 4 more. You probably could have stolen that too. You could have had like double the metal income, but regardless, you only want to detonate your commander at like the last moment because you want to milk his metal for as long as possible. So generally speaking, how that works is you start building your T2 lab. Whoops. You start building your T2 lab, right? And then as you get close to 0, then you detonate him and then you eat him. And this Conbot, who could have been eating a bunch of trees, once that explodes, he can run up and grab it. And then you don't need all this energy, right? You're going to end up at like 700 energy, and you just don't need that much for T2, right? You're going to need like way less than that. The other reason too, that I don't know, I didn't actually catch it or not, but your commander is 500 metal storage. Does it say on him? Yeah, so if you look in the bottom left, it says M storage 500. That drops you down to 750. If you aren't careful, sometimes you can detonate your commander and you'll overflow a bunch of your standing metal into your team because you lose the storage. So be really aware of that. It is not something you want to do. So yeah, your lab should be going down. And you don't even need the metal right now, right? So the whole time while your commander is dead right here, you've just lost metal per second, and there is kind of no reason for it, right? Okay, so now we're going to start building our T2 lab at about 6 minutes. This is sort of slow, and it looks like you're going to M stall. So a couple things. Okay. In a situation like this where you realize, oh my God, I have no metal, I have way too much energy, you could have built more converters, but also you can just go, oh yeah, T1 solars, they're useless past, they're useless later on in a game like this. So just start eating them to fund this lab. So, all right, Geo finishes. So your Geo finishes and you're at 800, right? And you have converters firing. Despite the fact that you're building this, if you look, you're only using 500 energy with all your builders building this lab, right? So all this excess energy, if you wanted, you could be converting it, but instead you're just overflowing it into your team, which isn't always bad, but when you're teching, you want to try to be super efficient. So this is just a note when you look up and you see something like this, it's like, oh, I overbuilt energy. I should probably like reclaim this to get this lab out as soon as possible. Okay, and it looks like you recognize that. I probably would have eaten it with these just because you're completely M-stalled. There we go, we're taking a max. Just got a few more. And so you've been M-stalled for a bit, right? And your guy ate that, but like, look, there's still 150 metal here. There's still metal here. Well, he's eating that metal now, but there's metal there. There's metal there. You can always look at the map and just get more, right? All the metal that's on the map right now is probably enough to like finish this T2 and get you a T2 con out. So make sure before you send your resbot back to your base that you've gotten everything you want to get from the front and that he's just reclaiming other things. But this is a good choice here where you're swapping and you're eating your solars. So I like that. T2 lab is about to finish. Let's go. Yeah, I'd probably use the build power from these to eat the solars. Okay, your lab is, okay. Your lab is idle. So you have a T2 lab, but when you go T2, keep in mind that a T2 lab by itself is utterly meaningless. And T2 in general does nothing for you until you first build a T2 con, and then second, start upgrading your mexes. And the reason why you don't want to be building more energy right now is because you need all this metal to get your T2 economy up, right? So he's 470. And then even if you're only upgrading these 3 mexes here, a T2 mex is 620 metal. right? So you're going to need 1800 to upgrade all of these, and you're going to need 470, right? So it's like almost 2300 metal that you just don't have right now. So you're allocating this, but you don't want to do that. As soon as you get to T2, your only focus should be getting out T2 bots, getting out T2 constructors so that you can upgrade your stuff. Because until this is out and these mexes are upgraded, this lab is useless, right? And you don't even need the energy. See, you're not even converting it. You're just overflowing to your team, but your team is like completely full. Both of your C's are winning, which is kind of amazing. So now we're going to build converters. Remember, you want to try to build them a little bit farther back. And we're eating these. So you want more build power, but you actually don't, right? Like we're talking about, you just want to get this T2 con out ASAP. And in terms of using this, what I would recommend is you don't build anything else. You get this guy out as soon as possible. You upgrade these 3 mexes, and then you upgrade your AGO. An AGO is absolutely absurd when it comes to efficiency for metal, right? So for example, well, once this guy's out and we can see. So you were building these advanced solars, right? An AGO is 1500 metal and it produces 1250 energy, right? So 1500 metal for 1250 energy. If we look at your 6 A solars right now, they're 2200 metal, right? Which is literally like 1,000 more metal, and it's only 450 energy. And so that's why overbuilding like T1 structures like this can be dangerous, because your whole goal is to get to T2 and then have just enough resources to start building a T2 economy, because the T2 economy is always going to be more efficient, especially on a map like this, right? Because you want to be building AFUs and other things. All right, so we start upgrading, but so it's 9 minutes and you're just starting your first mech, so you're about 3 minutes late, just to give you a sense of timing. In a situation like this, where you're so M-locked, you could theoretically drop metal storage and then eat your lab so that you have enough metal to kind of upgrade all of these. Oh no, don't build the solar. Okay. We talked about that enough, so let me just speed this up a bit. I think the main flaws were pointed out, but I'll kind of summarize them in a second. So you want to upgrade these. I would have all your build power upping this. Oh, and someone requests T2, which is awesome. That's another thing I didn't mention. As soon as your T2 lab is done, you should just ping and just say, like, I have T2. You can say whatever you want, right? But so that people can pay, because as soon as they can get T2 out to wherever they are, then the faster they can jumpstart their economies. And this is another just reminder where it's great if you have a transport, because Red just paid for this, right? And you're going to give it to him. But this poor little Khan has to put on his running shoes and he has to go like this. And it's going to take a long time because bot cons are super slow, right? It'll probably take him like a minute and a half to get there. Whereas if you have a transport, it's like 15 seconds and he just flies direct and gets dropped off. But I would say fix the initial part of kind of your build order first, and then you can think about like integrating transport play in. Okay, so I talked about AGO before. Just some small kind of teching asides, because I feel like your build is far enough away from what would be considered efficient that me giving comments on it now won't be super useful. But when you get to T2, right, especially if you have a Geo, you want to up your initial mexes, and then you would want to get your Geo. In a situation like this, I would probably get like 2 cons one to, one to get these and then up the geo, and then another one to run around and up the other ones. And then twitchers are absolutely incredible. So you could drop like 4 twitchers, 5 twitchers, and they could either boost this con, or you could send them to the front because it looks like you guys are starting to break through, and your twitchers could come to the front and they could make fiends, and then your fiends could go and attack everything else. So these grunts never saw battle. It's just metal and energy that could have been spent somewhere else. So you make fiends from here and you make arbiters from here. And a screamer. So I won't get into unit choice as much because I think that's probably something for a different video, but I would say just as a general comment, when you tech, I don't mind you being aggressive here because it seems like you guys are kind of pushing. A lot of times when you tech, it's better if you can just go T2, like you can go straight to T3, or you can have like a really scary push. So on here, for example, like if you had just teched on like 1 AFU AGO demon or something, you maybe could have Shiva, but it's far. You might have to do a forward lab, but making units really early here before you kind of have an economy doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I would say it's better if you just scaled up and then like a minute or two later, you could have showed up with like tier 3 and then just overwhelmed everything. But we can watch kind of the end of the game. I assume that because they lost both C's, they'll resign relatively soon. You send some units to mid. You're fighting with your units, which is good. And then as you can see, like, right, like the C's winning just make it so difficult because they're able to kill everything with the ships here. They also like didn't have an air player, which is a little weird. I guess maybe they had an air player later, but your yellow player got off a ton of bombs. All right, let me put it like half speed. So speed it up a bit. I think it's almost over. Let me pause. Let's just kind of briefly summarize some of what we talked about. I think the biggest thing I noticed from you, or I noticed for you in this game in terms of improvement, is you aren't playing to the map. And that's totally fine because you probably haven't played this map very much, but it's a map that has incredible title and incredible wind and incredible reclaim. So I think you could have leveraged a lot of the reclaim to be much better. I think you could have built wind, and I think you could have taken your geo and your AGO much sooner. That I think is probably the single biggest improvement I can see just for a build order. The other thing is that you want to get to tier 2 as soon as possible with as little committed as possible. You built a ton of A solars, right? You've got 3,000 metal worth of A solars that only give you 600 energy, right? And an AGO is half the metal and double the energy. And you maybe haven't played with a lot of geos before, but when you're going T2, you only need like 400 to 600 energy, right? If you have a bunch of reclaim and stuff, you could do it off like 350 and just reclaim all these trees to fund it. So your goal is to get T2, get the bot con out as soon as possible, and then upgrade your mexes. Just getting an early T2 is meaningless unless it can upgrade mexes. So try to have that be more of your focal point when you're teching. Another thing I noticed is that I feel like you needed more early cons, especially because there were a bunch of unclaimed mexes that were they were empty for like 8 minutes. It was absurd, right? And even if you only hold it for like half a minute, it pays for itself. A T1 mex pays for itself because it's 50 metal. So if you had more cons, they would have given you more energy. You could have tapped, taken more of the mexes, and then they can come back to base and you can use their build power to build stuff. Or if you need the metal, you can just eat them. But that is it for me on this. So just to like re-summarize, play to the map's resources, in this case, wind and reclaim. Don't overcommit to T1 economy, meaning you don't need as much energy production as you had. Build more cons so that you can be active on more parts of the map and you can utilize their build power and their energy. And then you want to take all the resources you can. So tap all these mexes, and then also eat all of the rocks and, you know, everything that's on the map, all the trees, so that you can leverage that to have kind of like a faster and more efficient T2. So that is it from me. I hope that was helpful. And if you have questions, feel free to post on the Discord thread.